Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Today we have a beige computer on the bench and I'm asking myself the question, is this worth saving? I have no idea what is inside this computer. It was brought to my attention by a big supporter of the channel. Thank you, Aaron, for bringing this to my attention. It was at a local thrift store and he said, hey, what do you think about this? So I went down, got it for 20 Canadian dollars. So I'm not asking myself the question, is it worth the $20? Because obviously with the components and the case and all those things, I would easily justify the $20. It's not that. Is this worth saving? I have no idea what's inside. I don't know what comes with it from the inside. We're going to find that out today. And normally when I do these types of videos, I usually do 2 or 3. We see if they post, we see if they go into an operating system. We're not doing any of that today on multiple computers. We're just going to focus in on this one system today. And you know what? Maybe give it some love because you can see it's quite dirty. And we're going to go over the whole system, find out what's in it, because hey, we're going to do this together and we'll see if we can get this computer up and running and see if it's worth saving. So you know what? We have lots to do. Let's get right to it. Welcome back. And in true fashion, we're going to go over this computer and kind of do an overview, and then we'll go inside and see what's on the inside. So the first thing on the outside, we have this beautiful beige chassis here. I like the look of this case personally. I like the kind of generic form of it versus all the ins and outs of some of those kind of custom PC cases. We have an LG 8-speed, 4-speed, 32-speed CDRW drive, so definitely an earlier model. Then we have a Super Multi RW DVD writer LG. So it's nice to see those two drives, specifically in the ivory type bezel here versus the black ones, which I have a pile of. So anytime I can get these, I definitely get my hands on them. And of course, we have a 3.5-inch floppy disk drive here as well. So we have obviously some additional room for 5.25-inch expansions. We have 3.5-inch expansion here, a couple LEDs. So for our power, our hard disk light, we also have a reset button here and a piece of Scotch tape on there. That's definitely got to come off if we're going to be cleaning it up today. And then down here, we also have a power button. And this power button is very, very, very hard to press. So I have no idea what's going on there or if that's going to cause us any grief later. We'll have to find that out. So we have a brand here. We also have, it says geared by MSI. And then we have the Intel Celeron sticker. So on the side here of the case, we don't have any damage at all. We do have this black kind of Sharpie mark here. I don't know what the purpose of that is or not, but you're going to see why I'm even calling that out. Normally, if you just see one, you'd leave it be, but there's other writing on this computer as well that we're going to draw some attention to. But the focus on this side is that there's no damage to the case. Usually you have dents and scratches and dings, but yeah, I'm not seeing any of that on this computer. So here we are, we have the ATX power supply here. We have two PS2, two USB, two communication ports here. We have a LPT printer port, we have our game port, and we have our audio, our 3 audio jacks in the back. And noting that we have a bunch of numbers here. So if this is plug-in by number, like paint by number, I don't know. But there's 1, 2, I don't know if that's the order in which they're trying to tell someone or remind someone to be able to plug the computer back in. I'm not sure, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we have the 6 and we have 7 down here. We have a couple numbers here. I don't know if it's 3 7s or not. Then we have an 8 over here, obviously for video by the looks of things. 9 for the game port. And then over here, I mean, I don't know if these are upside down or what. We have number 5 over here, but it looks like we have 5 here. So I don't know if this side of the case was flipped around and moved over here on this side at one point, and then they rewrote the numbers. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if people did this back in the day. I'd never really seen a case like this before with numbers written all over it. It looks like we have our video out, we have S-video out, and we have our SVGA or VGA D-sub out as well. And then down here we have, it looks like Ethernet port, and then we have a modem here as well. And yeah, so we'll continue on and flip it around the other side here. So again, here you can see that we have another notch or a mark over here. Okay, and here's the inside of this custom PC. And as you can see, it's custom because it's very generic parts. Obviously, it's not an OEM branded computer. So it looks like we have our power supply here. It says the output is, it looks like 250 watt power supply. And the only thing that makes me nervous about this power supply, and again, this not just be in my head, but it's disconnected. Like all the different components are disconnected from the system as if either the power supply was going to be replaced or they were already getting ready to take it out. So I don't know what that's about, but we'll have to find out as we go. And over here, we have our 2 optical drives, we have a floppy drive, and we do have a hard disk drive populated. So before I go any further, we're just going to take that hard disk out just because I want to see what it is. Just one little screw here. I say one screw because I did check the other side before I flipped the computer down, and that's literally it. So here we are. This hard drive feels extremely light. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I do see a screw's been removed from here, and I do see something's been cut out here as well. So it looks like this hard disk has been, I don't know, I want to say tampered with, but yeah, you can see, look at that. You can see that this has definitely been taken apart. So no doubt the drive is no good. You know, you can see the sticker's been cut out here, the screw's been removed here, and these screws have definitely been removed as well from the case. So yeah, I mean, obviously whoever turned this in threw the drive back together, but said, hey, you know what, you're not getting any of my information. And so I'm going to take the drive apart and see and make sure you're not able to get any data from it. So anyway, it looks like an 80 gig drive, not hard to replace, of course, but we won't be getting into an operating system with this, I don't think. There's definitely something going on inside there. I do want to try powering it up though, just to see, just for giggles, to see if it actually works or not. But clearly it's been open. Let's go inside here and take a look around at what we have inside this computer. So we have our Intel CPU. So it's Intel branded cooler here, and heatsink and fan above our Celeron processor. And I'm assuming it's Celeron because that's what's in here. I'm not going to take that out just yet because the chances are the system, if it posts, we can see exactly what the processor is. I don't have to worry about just yet about any of the compound and replacement until we're ready to go. Looks like we have 3 memory banks here, 3 ability to expand, which they are all populated. I'm going to take the first one out here, closest to the CPU, and see what it is. So you have PC 133, you have 256 megabytes of RAM. Apparently costs $159 for that one stick of memory. It's crazy to think about how much time has passed and that memory, how much that has come down. So we also have another 128 megabytes of memory, and we have another 128. So we have 512 megabytes of memory. No doubt, you know, upgradable to more than that, but 512 would be enough for what we're trying to do today. So I'm looking at the capacitors here. I believe that this is from the era of the capacitor plague as well. So I'm looking at the capacitors and I'm not seeing any sort of bulging caps here at all, or any other components on the motherboard. Now, one thing I'll call out is just because they don't look bad doesn't mean they aren't bad. That's one thing to say, is that there's a special time there that, you know, they could be leaking onto the motherboard from underneath, different things like that. So just be mindful of that when you're getting older systems like this, just to kind of look for these. But generally speaking, that if there's not any sort of signs of damage to the capacitors through wear, and generally the ones that are either really bad manufacturer quality based on what was used to make them, or again around the CPU, generally seems to be the more problematic area because of the heat distribution off of the heatsink. Can definitely do some damage, you know, heat up the capacitors around that area. So we have a VIA chipset here, VT82C694X, so VIA chipset, and I don't mind a VIA. I believe that they were pretty good, at least for me back in the day, so nice to see that. And there we are. So we have a something. Oh, here we go. So we have a Rage 128, and I'm seeing if it gives us any information on here. So copyright 1998 ATI Technologies. So yeah, overall, not a terrible card. I mean, this is one of those cards I have a few of. But yeah, it's nice to see a dedicated graphics card in here. Looks like this has video port, and yeah, I don't know if that's included there. Yeah, so the extra 2 video ports here that we see the video out, the S video here as well, it looks like to be an add-on. You can see that there. Looks to be an add-on to that. So that's new. I haven't seen that, to be honest with you. It looks like a separate part number here as well for that specific feature. I don't know if that was this is an earlier revision card, whereas later revisions came with that all kind of in the chipset itself on the PCB. So again, not sure, but nice to see as well. So I'll pop that back in just because we will be seeing if the system will come on for us. And we also have the AMR slot here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 PCI, and wait for it, another ISA. I love boards that have AGP, that have PCI and ISA. Very well-rounded board, definitely full-featured board when you start running into that sort of setup. Plus, back in the day, having the built-on USB, but also additional USB headers here on the board if you wanted to run breakouts into other area to add additional USB functionality. And of course, we have our wonderful wires running to our reset switch, our power switch, all those good things, our LEDs. And they even give us a nice little this kind of legend up here that whoever had the board printed it off and stuck it on the inside of the case. Pretty ingenious when you think about it, because how often do you, back in the day when you're working on these computers, you go replace the board, you go to replace whatever's working on here, and then you have to go look it up or bring the manual out because you don't have that. That's pretty neat. All right. It's funny how these network cards became so small. So it's just a Realtek chipset. It doesn't look to be branded by anybody other than, of course, Realtek. And so for the modem, we have a Connexent modem chipset. So it looks like a 56K modem. It looks like it's a soft modem, PCI. And it just says in the back here, it's A-Open. There we go. So it's an A-Open FM 56-SLM modem here. So it gives a bunch of part information and everything. But yeah, just so it's an A-Open soft modem, 56K. Not too bad though. Still having a modem back in the day to be able to do all your internet stuff. You know, at the time, high-speed functionality wasn't all out there yet. Okay, so what we're going to do now, so we've gone over the board. The motherboard itself, by the way, is an MSI MS-6309. So you can get all that information on the RetroWeb. That's where I go for a lot of my information for looking up the schematics of these boards, as well as any sort of documentation, jumper settings, you know, all those good things. So that looks pretty awesome that this is all together. So it looks like we have all of our components, minus, of course, the drive. I'm going to, we're going to test the power supply. So we're going to get this kind of swap back up on the bench so we have a better view of being able to do the work on it. And we're going to test out this power supply first, just to make sure that that's functioning. And then we can, we'll make a decision where to go from there. Let's go. Okay, so here we are with the system all kind of situated on the bench temporarily while we do a test of the power supply. Again, I don't know if this works. So what I do is I have the power supply currently plugged in the back. It's not plugged into the power bar just yet. You'll see me do that when I actually go to do it. You'll be able to see it on the angle here. Okay, so we have our power supply tester. We have our hard disk here. I'm just going to stand up here. I have no idea if it works or going to work. We're going to take the power and plug it in and see what happens. The hard disk itself is not seeking. It's spinning, then slowing down and spinning and speeding up again. Yeah, so I think that's causing some power fluctuations here a little bit. As the power supply voltages change there, the hard disk itself is spinning up and slowing down, spinning up and slowing down. So I don't know if that's an issue with the power supply or if that's an issue with the hard disk. Now, given the hard disk has been taken apart, okay, so I have one that says bad sectors, but it is a functioning hard disk that was never taken apart. So what we're going to do is plug this in and do the same thing and see what it does. And if all of a sudden this is spinning up and going down, spinning up and going down, we know there's an issue with the power supply. Okay, let's plug this back in. Okay, so you can see that the voltages are holding strong now, as opposed to before where they were having that kind of challenge there before. We know this is working fine now. So what I want to do is I'm going to plug this into the motherboard, get the system set up on the bench, the keyboard, mouse, and monitor, and see if we can get this system posting. Okay, and we're back on the bench all set up, and I had to dig out the sun monitor from our previous thrift finds video right there. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's an awesome, lots of awesome finds in that video. And I just wanted to take it out. Usually we use the HP, but I figured I would stretch the sun's legs, and yeah, it just looks really nice with this system. So, okay, I think we're good to go. So you can see a hard disk over here. I found another 80 gigabyte hard disk. It's from Seagate. I don't remember if it's working or not. I don't have an X on it, so I'm pretty sure it probably works. We'll just hit the power button and go from there and cross our fingers and see if this, again, is worth saving or not. And we have power. Accessing the optical drives. Do we have post? Numlock, nothing on the num. We have post. Look at that. Look at that, everybody. We have absolute post. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful sight. And it's a Celeron 1 gigahertz CPU at that. Oh my goodness. I'm absolutely, yeah, excited. This is awesome. Love this already. So you can see it's counting through the memory here. And I believe we said we had 512 megabytes of RAM in here. Okay, so we have the 512 megabytes of memory here, and let's see here. So it says CMOS, checksum bad, display type wrong, F1 setup, low default. So obviously the coin cell that's in this, the CR2032, is not working. So we're going to have to replace that if we decide to restore this computer. All right, so we have our standard CMOS set up here. We'll click on that. And so everything's set to auto, and we do have the floppy drive set to 1.44. Does this have an auto detect option here? Let's see here. Oh, it actually has right in. We have a floptical option as well. That's interesting. We'll go into BIOS features setup and just take a look at everything. So our first device will be our floppy, then our IDE 0, then our CD-ROM. I like that swapped around, actually. I like the CD-ROM to be the second boot device, and then our IDE drive to be next. Okay, so we have display mode is BIOS, that's fine. Smart disk is disabled currently. That's fine for now. We'll tweak all this stuff later. I'm just taking a look at everything to make sure everything is looking good here. Our chipset features, our DRAM frequency, this is all for the memory. That looks good. Power management, not going to touch that right now. And I'm going to go into integrated peripherals to make sure that we have everything looking good here. I'm just looking over the different settings. I mean, generally this is these are all the components that would be installed. So we have our built-on audio, which is set to auto because we don't have a sound card inside this computer. Hardware, we have our monitoring, and our monitoring seems to be working fine. So we have our CPU fan running just fine there. Temperature running at 31 degrees Celsius, 87 Fahrenheit, and our current system temperature is slightly cooler. And then we have IDE auto detection. So there we go. So it did detect the DVD-ROM, the CD-ROM, and the 80 gig drive. That's awesome. So I do have a working hard disk there. Okay, I'm going to escape out of that. I'm going to save and exit setup and hit yes. Okay, so I think based on everything I see here, is this computer worth saving? Yay, nay? I think it gets a yay. I think this computer is definitely worth saving. We have a decent motherboard. We have 2 optical drives. We have our floppy. We have a working hard disk that is fully detected, that it's trying to boot off of, but it's not going to be able to. And then we have our Celeron 1 gigahertz CPU. I don't have any of those in the collection. So nice to have that. So I think it's time to flip this computer back around and start doing some TLC to this computer and get everything kind of cleaned up and get it looking a lot better than it currently is. Let's go. Okay, so we have all the components removed from the chassis itself. So I'm going to take all this out and I'm going to get this all kind of scrubbed all down and get the front bezel all scrubbed down and get this returned to the bench so we can start focusing on some of the components. Here we go. The chassis itself is completely scrubbed down. I was able to get all the black markers off. I was able to get all the rust off, everything that was on that system, including all the tape and everything like that. But you know, when you're doing this stuff, you should be really wearing gloves. I'm using 99% isopropyl alcohol and a few other chemicals and things like that, and I didn't do that. And my hands are quite pasty right now. So just word of the wise, when you're doing that stuff, just make sure you wear gloves. You know, it's good for the soul. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is work on cleaning the components that were inside the computer. And in this case, 3 different cards, the additional memory, things like that. This is fairly straightforward. I mean, these are in great shape. Normally I have to do a bunch of dusting first. We're using the anti-stack brush here that I have. But you know, these are in really good shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use some isopropyl alcohol again, the 99%. That I have, and I'm just going to give these like a little bit of a bath in that, and it doesn't take much to dust them off, and it's just a very thin layer of dust that's on this, so it doesn't take much to get them all cleaned up. I'm going to do that for all the different components of the system. As you can see, this side is absolutely immaculate just because of the way it sits inside the computer, that the dust doesn't seem to have affected it any. So yeah, okay, I'm just going to continue on, get this all cleaned up, and here we go. I have everything mostly clean. I say mostly just because there's some little odds and ends to clean up here, including the cables and what have you. Just want to call out though, when I was going to remove the heatsink from the processor here, I snapped the plastic, you know, being brittle, older, etc. Whatever, it happens. It's unfortunate, but it broke. So I do have a replacement socket 370 from StarTech here, which I'm going to utilize for this project just because, I mean, it is brand new. I'm not worried about it not working. The bearings will be brand new as well. It's probably not a bad practice to get into anyway, replacing these while you're doing this. I generally do clean them, and the Intel ones are generally pretty good as well. But I just want to call out that I did unfortunately have to replace that, so I'm going to do that right now. So there's our Celeron 1000 CPU, so definitely a beautiful sight. So I'm going to pop this back in and get ready to reassemble the computer. Okay, there we go. We have the heatsink and fan on there nice and tight, so that's nice and good to go. Okay, one of the things I like to do while the motherboard is out of the computer is to replace that coin cell battery, that CR2032. So I'm just going to pop that out. Pretty straightforward, just a little lever there. And there's our new coin cell battery. Okay, that's done. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is get some contact cleaner here. And I want to install the memory as well while we're here. It's just easier to work on while it is like this. So I'm just going to spray some contact cleaner in here. And this is just always a good habit of doing while you're working on these machines, is utilizing. I know I cleaned the RAM already, and it did work even when I had removed it before, but it's good to go through the process of installing the memory by using the contact cleaner here as well. So there we go. 2 in, and we'll put number 3 in. And with the contact cleaner as well, it just slides in so much nicely. Okay, we have that installed now. What a beautiful looking motherboard, if I do say so myself. We have a brand new StarTech fan there as well, our socket 370 fan. The next step I'm going to do is get this bench all cleaned up. There's lots of stuff going on around here. Get all the components ready to go, and we'll start reinstalling them into the chassis. Okay, we're all back now, and we're going to start reassembling this computer. And so everything's been absolutely detailed, cleaned, and all those good things. Just before we continue, I just want to mention, before I reoriented the case this way for the camera, I did install the power supply, the 2 optical drives, and the floppy drive. There's not much to that, obviously, just a matter of a couple screws and getting it all aligned. Not much to show on camera. I've done it a few times in my other videos, but essentially I just wanted to get ahead of the game and get those drives populated. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is pop in the motherboard. And so if you notice, I left all the standoffs where they were because we were putting the same motherboard back in the computer. Okay, so here's our beautiful motherboard that we already populated the CPU and the RAM into. So we're just going to slide this in slowly like this without doing any sort of damage. We're going to pop the ports through the back IO shield and pop it down. If you see those 2 plastic standoffs here will automatically just kind of line up, and they clip in just like that. So they just go down and they clip in. Now the motherboard is secure in place, as you can see. Can't shift around. It's greatly aligned. And then now we have our screws to put in. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so we have the 4 screws in place there holding down the motherboard, and you don't need to tighten them, super tight. You just need to tighten them just, a little quarter turn past being super tight there, just because you want to make sure that you don't do any sort of torquing on the board itself on the PCB. Okay, so we have that all connected now. The next thing we're going to do is install the power supply connector here, just to have that already in place. We'll put that into the motherboard. Okay, so we have that installed there now, and the next thing we're going to do is start running some of the data cables just for the optical drives. So we're going to look after this top area first before we start to populate the rest of the system here. And we have a brand new fresh cable that I have here in stock. This is a 24-inch dual IDE drive cable. So we're just going to pop this in, and we'll pop this into the secondary port on the motherboard. We're going to populate that first, and then we'll do the primary IDE as well. Pin number 1 down here written on the silk screen, so it tells you where it is. Now this particular cable does not have the notch, so you can't really tell outside of the red ribbon, so it's important to align that properly onto the motherboard. Okay, so we have that installed. Nothing like a fresh cable. And we'll continue on up here. So the red ribbon goes against the power side of the IDE connection, the back of the optical drive. We'll put that up here, and then we'll do the same on the upper drive. And the other thing I'll mention that I did while I was maneuvering all of this is I moved the 2 drives close to each other to make sure that they were next to each other on the top, just because I like that look better. You can do whatever you want. In this particular case, in this computer, they were separated. There was one here and one here, so but I just put them up together just to kind of keep everything kind of clean up in that area. Okay, good old IDE, right? Cable management was never something that was a forte of that technology. And then here, we're just going to move up this cable. I'm going to tuck it in up here just so it's kind of out of the way. First cable I'm going to plug in is going to be this Molex here. So it's red to red is how you do it. So if the red ribbon cable of the IDE is pointing up towards you, you put the red power towards the IDE red ribbon cable there. So there we go. We'll do the same thing here. Okay, so we have those two optical drives connected for both data and power, which is fantastic. The next thing I'm going to do is work on the floppy. That's the next thing down in our chain here. So I'm going to get our floppy cable. Now, I don't have a brand new floppy cable. Well, I do, but it has a couple of the connectors for the old 5 1/4 drive. So I don't want to utilize that in this setup because I want to save that for another day. But if you notice that this is keyed, so it does have a notch there. So I'm going to use that notch and plug it into the floppy connector on the motherboard. And I say keyed just so you know it has that notch, and I can line it up here. And so some of the cables for the floppies are, I mean, not the cables, but the cables are always twisted here. You can see that twist. So it's important to make sure you line it up properly on the floppy drive in order for it to detect it properly. Okay, so the next step is to plug our power in, which it is reversed on here, so I should have done that first. Now, our last one is another IDE cable required for the hard disk. And this is just, like I said, an 80 gigabyte Seagate drive, and I am using a 7200 RPM drive here. That's 80 gigabytes. I mean, spinning rust, that's what it's nicknamed in the industry. I love using this. I use it all the time. I have lots and lots and lots of hard disk drives. So for me, it makes sense. Now, others, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you would go with something like an IDE to SSD or an IDE to compact flash. I mean, there's different options you can utilize to be able to take advantage of better speeds and access rates and things like that. But personally, for me, I quite frankly love to utilize the older drives. It does two things for me. It kind of gives me the feeling of what the speed would have been like back in the day when I'm building a retro machine or restoring a retro machine, all the way to the sounds that you experience by utilizing this technology. That's just my 2 cents. Everybody has their own opinions, and yeah, all good. So now just a note, I'm putting 2 screws in here. There should be a screw on the other side because it's not right now. I will get that here off camera when I go to flip the computer around, just because we already have this all oriented, and we're going to continue on just populating all the different components in the computer. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is get the IDE cable for the hard disk to go to the primary IDE port on the motherboard. So I'm going to get that right now. So you can see we have a very short cable here, easy to access everything. Everything's looking really nice and clean in terms of this technology, what this offers. Again, newer computers with SATA and different types of wiring. Technology allows you to cable tie things nice around the chassis as you go, but in this case with ribbon, it's a little more difficult. But you know, the importance is to promote cooling as best you can, airflow within the case, and it gets limited when you start having ribbon cables absolutely everywhere hovering over this area. So it's nice to have that cleaned up. Okay, so I also have, as I mentioned, we have our floppy connected here, and then so we'll just hook up our power. There we are. So now that we have all that kind of out of the way, and we have the RAM already populated from earlier, the next logical step is to populate the video card. And I'm going to keep with the same video card that came with the computer. And so one of the things that I like to do through this process, people say on the comments, they say, you know, why don't you upgrade the video card? You know, you could put a much better video card in here than the Rage 128. Well, maybe, but that's not what we're doing. That's not the scope of what today's video is. Is this computer worth saving? Was the purpose of what we're doing. And so far, with all the components that came with this, I haven't added anything to this computer outside of changing out a shorter cable, putting in a brand new IDE cable just because of just make it look nicer, and then of course the hard disk itself I had to change out because obviously the old one was tampered with. So I mean, I'm using this. There's different technologies out there. I mean, I could put a Voodoo card in here. I could do different things. And yes, who goes to say we can't upgrade this computer later down the road, whether it's more memory, a different CPU, if I wanted to go to the Pentium 3 series versus the Celeron, things like that. So again, I'm doing this for now, but doesn't mean we can't change it out later. I should be using contact cleaner. I do this in all the applications, whether it was working or not. It's just something that I do just to make sure that we have good contact for this. Okay, we'll put it back here. We have the screw in there, so there we go. Then we have our two bays that were just populated with these blanks, so we're going to pop those in next. Okay, so the last step is going to be our modem. We do not need a modem in this computer whatsoever. And I know there's probably lots of people saying, why bother? Again, restoring it back to the original, what this system was. And I have boxes of modems. Like I said, if it's not in this computer, it'll be sitting in a box somewhere. So I may as well put it in the PC for at least retro aesthetics and have that installed. Everything's looking really, really good. The last step that I'm going to do now is to, fortunately we have a nice little diagram here that the previous owner had left us. So I'm going to connect all these cables for the reset switch, the power switch, LEDs, etc. I'm going to get those connected right now, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I have all of the cables, all the power and LEDs and switches and all that stuff all connected. I mean, in terms of a Celeron 1000 system with 512 megabytes of RAM and an 8 gig hard drive, it's looking absolutely beautiful in here. It is completely cleaned out. The motherboard is fantastic, giving us an array of expansion and classic retro PC in its finest. Okay, so I'm going to get this all resituated. I'm going to take the panel off the other side, put some screws on the other side of this hard disk, and then get the bench all set up for doing our initial test. So let's go. Okay, and here we are with the system all cleaned up, set up, and look how beautiful this tower looks now. I mean, before it was full of dirt, grime, stickers. You saw before how we had all the black marks on it and all the different rust spots. And yeah, I mean, just absolutely wonderful. All the glue residues removed, and it just looks beautiful. The only thing missing from this is I'm going to order a couple of new stickers from Geekenspiel. So what we're going to do is turn it on and just see that all our work was not for nothing. So let's see what happens. I get lights. There we are. Okay, so we have our Celeron 1 gigahertz CPU and we have our 512 megabytes of memory. I just hit the del key or delete key to get into the setup here. Okay, so we have our standard CMOS setup. So we're going to change the date here. So we're going to go to, it is February already. I can't believe it. And we'll set the date properly here. We have our 80 gigabyte drive. So we have it set to auto detect. So it would have detected this in the initial boot. And then we have not installed for our secondary drive. And then of course we have our two optical drives. We also have our floppy disk here, and we don't have a secondary floppy, but then it gives you a whole bunch of different options here. I like that little interface there, to be honest with you, being able to give you the options as you go through. Okay, let's continue going on here. BIOS features set up, so then of course we don't need to change anything here right now. I believe we have everything set correctly. And again, we have the new battery, the new coin cell battery in here, so we have it all set to save. Hardware monitors, so we're seeing the CPU is heating up there, so we're about 32 degrees Celsius, 89 Fahrenheit. It's pretty standard. The new fan is running faster. It looks like it's, it just looks like it's, again, a different fan, different speeds versus the Intel that we had in there before. But all the voltages look good by the looks of things there as well. In terms of an operating system for this computer, I debated this a little bit. I'm leaning toward 98 edition for this computer, and because it's the most compatible with the DOS gaming side of things if you want to make a retro gaming rig. And the same thing, like if I would decide to go with Windows Millennium Edition or something like that, it's a little more cumbersome to get into the real mode DOS versus utilizing the 98 edition version. I'm going to go with Windows 98 edition for this. Just wanted to walk everyone through my mindset on it and get this computer all set up. So let's go through the Windows 98 setup. Okay, and here we are, all set up on the bench with our Windows 98 fully installed, our second edition. It's just a really great looking machine. I love the ivory beige cases, and this one cleaned up really nicely. So we'll go into my computer real quickly under Device Manager, and we'll take a look here. And I'm going to give everybody a better view of the screen. Okay, a much better view now. So we have our CD-ROM drives. They're installed, our optical drives. So we have our two LG drives. Under display adapters, we have our Rage Fury. That's the Rage 128 that came with this machine. Again, we haven't made any alterations to the system. And then we have our software Win modem, our soft modem. So we have our AOpen 56K modem, often referred to as Win modems. And then we have our network adapters. So there's our Realtek, generic Realtek PCI fast Ethernet controller, and then we have our VIA chipset AC97 audio controller for our sound card, and so all the drivers are completely installed on this computer. So yeah, I mean, overall, I mean, the computer is, well, to be honest with you, I'm very impressed with it being what it is. I mean, having 512 megs of RAM and 80 gigabyte hard disk installed in this computer here is just absolutely wonderful to see, and fully functioning. It's very, very snappy. I mean, it's Celeron 1000 CPU, so 1 gigahertz CPU, and yeah, it's I'm very impressed with everything so far.
Are you ready for some down and dirty racing? Our work pays off for Brad Park.
Prisoners 8 over 9 escaping. Prisoners 4, 7, 2, escape. Prisoners 3 to 7 escaping. You have entered a restricted area. A restricted area.
And here we are at the end, and, you know, asking ourselves the question, was this computer worth saving? I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up and say absolutely yes. We have a computer for $20 that came with that beautiful MSI motherboard, the Celeron 1 gigahertz CPU, 512 megabytes of RAM, the ATI Rage Fury video card, and some other components. And to be honest with you, after going through and scrubbing down the entire PC, getting rid of all the black marker, cleaning up the chassis, it just looks awesome. And it's a completely awesome retro gaming rig with lots of expansion capabilities on that motherboard. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of different games from this era that you can play, a whole bunch of different things you can do, and I'm sure there's different Linux operating systems and distros, and again, keep me honest in the comments, that we can install on here to, again, bring additional life to this hardware. At the end of the day, that's what this is all about. That's what the channel is all about, bringing you nostalgia. For me, I couldn't get the Dells and the IBMs and the HPs at the time. We custom built our PCs using components that I could find off the shelf, and we just did that. And so I'm so used to doing that and living that life of going through and trying to tweak your hardware and tweak the settings and make everything work better. And how much more life can you get out of your computer? And that was the Wild West, as I continue to refer to it as, back in the day. And, you know, this system, I believe the board is from 2001. So, I mean, in the turn of the century, we were having all this really cool race of hardware and software and changes and things like that. And I mean, I chose Windows 98 because that seems to be the sweet spot for this hardware. And again, you could arguably go with different operating systems on this. But again, I am very excited to have this. Now, one thing I will call out is at the beginning, I don't know if you noticed it when the computer was starting up, it did indicate that there wasn't an 80 conductor cable, IDE cable, that it was detecting on IDE 0. So I did replace that cable. This is a 40 conductor IDE cable. I did replace it with the 80. And so it removed that error. And I also enabled DMA on the in the settings in the system. So that allowed us to get more performance out of that hard disk. And that hard disk, even though it's spinning Rust, is going quite quickly. It's a 7200 RPM drive, 80 gig, replacing that 80 gig right here that was inside the computer that came with it, that clearly has been tampered with and pried apart and taken apart. So yeah, I mean, outside of that drive, everything else was absolutely worth saving in my opinion. And I'm very excited to be able to do that and excited to keep this out of the landfill and be able to share this with absolutely everyone on the channel today. That said, if you liked today's video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Makes a world of difference, helps the channel grow. Hit the notification button, change it to all. You'll be notified of new content such as this. Please leave a comment down below. Tell me about your stories about custom building your own PCs. What experience do you have with the Celeron processor? I'd love to hear all about it. Let me know down in the comments. I respond to absolutely every one of them. Always making new content. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.